If you've ever killed a houseplant, I bet I can tell you why it died. Because really, almost all houseplant deaths come down to two issues. Let's break it down. Now, this is actually the easier of the two issues to fix because the majority of houseplants in people's homes are not getting enough light. And so, what most people do is they find a plant that might be listed as a low light plant, and then they put it somewhere that's low light in their house, when in reality, even your low light plants do appreciate and love natural light, so being close to a window. In fact, plants like these that are low light tolerant plants like peace lily, ZZ plant, snake plant, and pothos are actually plants that prefer to be in bright light. The reason why they are listed as low light tolerant is because they're very, very slow to die in a low light situation. So people think that they actually like low light, but that's not the case. By getting your houseplant to a brighter spot in the house, whether that's pressed up against a window or close to a glass door or under a high quality grow light, then you're going to solve the majority of your issues with problem number one. Now, if your plant does get the appropriate amount of light or bright light, then the issue most likely is going to be number two, which would be water. So people will either have a tendency to be the one that overwaters plants or the one that underwaters plants. But we first need to define what that means. So overwatering a plant actually doesn't have anything to do with how much water you use when you water that plant. It's more about how much time is in between you watering that plant. So, for example, if you water a plant every day and the soil just never can dry out, then that's going to be a case of overwatering and you can actually kill your plant by doing that. Now, don't get me wrong, and don't go to the other extreme of underwatering a plant where you don't actually thoroughly soak the entire root ball of the plant when you water. Your goal when you water any plant, whether that is a cactus succulent or something that loves water like a calathea, is to water the entire root zone of the plant. If you just pour a tiny amount of water on top, the roots down at the bottom won't ever get water. They'll start to die off and your plant's going to suffer. Your goal when you are watering any of your plants, whether that is a plant like a cactus or a succulent that likes to stay on the dry side, or a plant such as a calathea that likes to stay more wet, is you need to make sure that you are watering the entire root zone whenever you water. So don't just put a little bit of water and get the top of the soil wet. Soak all of the soil and all of the roots every time you water. But keep in mind the frequency of your watering. So something like a succulent or a snake plant wants to actually dry out fully in between watering. So soak it completely and then let it dry out fully and then soak it again. Whereas something like this philodendron doesn't want to dry out completely in between waterings. You would want to water this once the soil goes from like a soggy wet down to a little bit moist. Then you start thinking about watering this again, but you don't want to keep it soggy wet all the time. Another important thing to remember is that your pot needs good drain holes. And so if your pot has drainage and your plant is getting plenty of light, it actually makes it quite hard to overwater these plants unless you're just watering so much that the soil is just staying soggy all the time. So look up your types of plants and figure out what their water requirements are, whether they're one that likes to stay more on the moist side of life or one that likes to dry out completely in between waterings, and then give them bright light, follow the water guides, and you're 95% of the way to being a great houseplant keeper.